Hi everyone, this is a departure from my normal type of video. It's an update on travelling to Australia in June 2022, particularly for unvaccinated people. So I'm just going to share my research with you. I was doing this research for myself because there's, as you know, so much information out there at the moment. It's different for different countries, different states, and yeah, I thought if it's useful to me, there might be other people out there it helps as well. So a little bit of context. I am an Australian citizen and a UK citizen, so I have both passports. I live in the UK. I've lived here for 20 years, but I regularly, before COVID, would go back to Australia to visit family there. I am not vaccinated and I will not get vaccinated. And I'm waiting to be able to travel to Australia with all restrictions removed, whether people have taken it or not. No masks on aeroplanes and no restrictions at all or threat of them in the country when I get there. So that's my point of view, but I'm going to try and just give the information in a neutral way and hope that it helps you. So first website I usually check in with is australia.gov.au. The last major change, as you can see, was on the 18th of April. That was when they really opened up travel. So at the moment, vaccinated people, whether you're a citizen or not, can enter Australia. Unvaccinated citizens of Australia and I believe New Zealand can enter, and we don't have to quarantine anymore, but there are a few restrictions on that. So let me show you what they are. So yeah, basically, if you're unvaccinated and not an Australian citizen, you can't travel there at the moment without an exemption. So what's the process for travelling to Australia? This was the guidance from the 18th. Yep, that's that, same website. Okay, so the next slides are from the homeaffairs.gov.au, guidance for unvaccinated travellers. So they dropped hotel quarantine on the 30th of April, so you don't have to do that anymore. If you're unvaccinated now and an Australian citizen, you're expected to get a PCR test. I don't think it's compulsory. I think it's just recommended. Apparently, you don't have to log the results unless it's a positive result. I don't believe they kind of track that you've submitted a result. But you can't go into healthcare facilities for 7 days after you arrive. Again, I don't know if they're checking that or if this is just what they're saying to cover themselves. Okay, passengers from overseas. This is for unvaccinated travellers. It says you have to go straight to your accommodation or home. I don't know how that's meant to work out for people who then have to travel again from the major city they land at. You're expected to take a test, self-isolate until you get a negative result. Again, I don't know if you need to submit that or if they track it. And you can't visit healthcare settings for 7 days. So that's that. It did say there were different requirements for different states. So I clicked through each one. I've put up here for unvaccinated travellers entering Victoria and New South Wales. But as I click through the other states, it's pretty similar for all of them. So there's Victoria. It just says you're strongly recommended to take the PCR test within 24 hours. It says you don't have to isolate while you wait for the results. You have to do a test if you develop symptoms within 7 days and just to comply with various mask requirements there may or may not be in shops. And you can travel straight on to another state without a PCR test. Okay, here's a little bit about Australia, like for the whole country's vaccine requirements. When it says you must meet Australia's vaccine requirements, at the moment that is 2 doses of whatever it is that people may have taken. Okay, So current news stories around this at the moment, these stories are from Sky News from 2 days ago, relating to the Northern Territory. So Northern Territory ends the public health emergency status and the vax mandate next week. So this is from Monday, which is the 13th of June. They've shut the quarantine facility, or they will be shutting it, as the state has scrapped all vaccine mandates. That's for people doing their jobs and entering the state. Okay, news from Victoria. Dan Andrews says Victorians can make their own decisions after Greens proposed fresh face mask campaign. Why on earth the Greens are doing that, I don't know. Dan Andrews has an election coming up, so this goes contrary to all of his previous very harsh restrictions in Victoria, but now he's saying people can make their own decisions. This does suggest, though, that there won't be any more mask or other mandates in Victoria, which is good to hear, despite it being winter and various stories about a winter wave of COVID. Okay, here's another one from Victoria. His department, told to release the COVID-19 pandemic surveys in strong interest of the Victorian public. So this again is from Sky News. There's been a decision to release secret documents from the height of the pandemic, and he wants this overturned. I wonder why. I wonder what it says. To me, it sounds like that Pfizer side effects thing that they tried to not release, and he doesn't want this released either, probably because there are things in there that would affect his chance of re-election. And you see in the comments to all of these, very disparaging. It's rare to see a comment supporting any more of the mandates or restrictions. Most of them are very, very critical. Okay, here we've got from Sky News, we've got our new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, seeks to have a national strategy to handle COVID. He's vowing no more lockdowns and a national strategy. This is probably in contrast to when Scott Morrison was there and state premiers had a lot of power to lock down their states and put in restrictions just in their states. There wasn't a national kind of strategy. So this could be good or bad, but I think it would be good if he's saying no more lockdowns. Obviously, he's still tiptoeing around the issue, cautioning Australians, still saying it's a major issue, when actually here in Europe, this is where we were 6 months ago. Australia seems to be 6 months behind. Australia also seems to be following the lead of America rather than Europe. I think USA, Canada, New Zealand and Australia are still the four most restricted countries, and I think they are gearing up and hinting at loosening of these restrictions, but it's happening in slow motion, and I think it will happen in all those countries around the same time. I keep watching the news from America about unvaccinated people being able to travel, because I think that will then have a domino effect on these other countries. Okay, so from news.com.au, which I find really good, it's still putting out these stories of variants during the Australian winter, scaring people with that. So we're coming up with all these new variants, soaring case numbers and so on, all the stuff we've been hearing over the past 2.5 years. That's still going strong in parts of the Australian media. But I've also read elsewhere stories referring to Australia that new variants will completely evade the vaccines anyway, if they ever worked in the first place. Okay. I just found it interesting to find some advice on Australia from other countries. So this is what it said, advice from the Hong Kong Embassy for people travelling to Australia. Pretty much the information I've already shown from the government website. So just repeating that unvaccinated citizens can go to Australia, but need to isolate if they have COVID symptoms and do a PCR test, submitting the result if it's positive. Again, unvaccinated citizens from other countries cannot enter Australia at the moment. There is no quarantine, though, for people entering. So it's all very contradictory. I mean, okay, I'm an Australian citizen, but so I can enter Australia and then do a PCR test. I think in New South Wales, which is where I'd go, I'd be expected to go directly to my home, which is not the city I'd be flying into, and isolate until I get that negative result. I don't know where you're meant to get the PCR test. If you buy one there, it has to be a recommended one, or if you can bring one from your country. Yeah, so that's pretty much the Australian government advice being repeated on the Hong Kong website, Hong Kong Embassy website, sorry. Okay, some other news stories I've found. Basically what I'm doing here, I sit and I look up recent news stories around coronavirus relating to Australia, stories around being able to travel there, and I'm just watching and waiting until I can go. I can actually go now as an unvaccinated citizen, but I'm not willing to until it's fair for everybody. I also just find it ridiculous that, you know, I live in the UK. I've lived here for 20 years. I'm like a UK citizen. I could fly with someone from the UK who only has a British passport. I'm allowed in just because I have an Australian passport. They are not. So very contradictory and ridiculous. So another story, this is from the Sydney Morning Herald, 10th of June. In Western Australia, the Border Force commander there is saying international visitors, I assume whether vaccinated or not, still aren't match fit, which I guess means safe to enter that state. Ridiculous. I was meant to be going to Western Australia on my last visit, which was meant to be 3 years ago. No, actually, sorry, 2 years ago. Won't be going back there anytime soon with leaders in place like that. Okay, what have we got here? New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet, oh, this was good, step in the right direction from last week, declares an end to vaccine mandates. So they're ending the mandates for work in New South Wales. So the teachers, unvaccinated teachers, haven't been able to work in New South Wales. They were pressured to get it. They're still on full pay, so good for them. But there's a teacher shortage. There always has been. They need them back, so they're dropping this mandate. Unvaccinated teachers who held out, good for you. You've been paid and you are getting your jobs back. Brilliant. What's this one? Oh, this is just some detail from that story. It was in the Daily Mail on the Australia tab. So you can see what he says there. Mandates were very important early on to drive uptake, but they have largely passed their usefulness. Hear, hear. Although you look here, completely different in Queensland. So this is all just one step forward, two steps back. Suspended teachers, like the ones in New South Wales, are threatened with being sacked if they don't get the vaccine in just 2 weeks. Don't know if they're still being paid. I assume they are, like the New South Wales teachers. You know, you'd think if they've held out till now, they're hardly going to, at this point, take it to go back to their job. I think this is just a token thing. They will give their jobs back. If it's happening in New South Wales, I think it will happen in Queensland. So thinking of them. Let's have a look at Qantas. So Qantas, despite what the Australian government may or may not be saying, or the individual states, you cannot fly on a Qantas flight unless you've had 2 doses of it. So Qantas has lost my business for life. I'm just going to state that here. And I'm someone who flew regularly on international flights, long-haul international flights, internal flights. No more flights on Qantas for me. So that's where we stand with Qantas. Okay, so as I said, I look at the news from the USA. One step in the right direction this week. So this is from Arab News on the 11th of June, but I read this story everywhere. They've listed testing there for vaccinated travellers. Still, if you're unvaccinated, you basically can't enter the USA. Travel groups, tourism groups putting pressure on the government because they're losing so much tourism money, same as what's happening in Australia. You know what I think in Australia? I think they are going to turn it in the next few weeks. I think the states have been told to lift their mandates because it would be pretty ridiculous having state vaccine mandates and laws for masks and things if they're then letting in unvaccinated international travellers. So I think they've been told pretty much this week to lift those restrictions. There'll probably be a breather of a week or two. And then I do think late June, early July, that they are going to lift the restrictions for the likes of me and us, I assume. If you're listening to me, you're a similar viewpoint. We've got people you care about who are in a similar situation. So that is the end. I hope that was useful. If you're anything like me and you're regularly just checking these news stories to see where we stand and try and make sense of it and try and plan ahead, like I say, I just thought if I'm looking this up, there's probably other people like me feeling the same. I just wanted to share with you what I found. Like I say, I think the next big change in these laws is going to be when they let unvaccinated travellers in with no restrictions. So if you're interested or if this was helpful, let me know. If you'd like me to make more updates like this, do let me know, and I'm happy to do that. And just hang in there, guys. Know that you're not alone in your frustrations and, you know, the difficulties of not being able to travel like we used to and not knowing when we will be able to again. But I'm sure we will. I'm sure it's not that much longer. And just stay positive and better days are ahead. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.